Now, I keep crapping on about this Robin Hood legend and almost tripping over cables. Luckily, I haven't. So, I keep crapping on about this Robin Hood legend, but maybe you guys haven't seen a film or a TV show. Maybe you grew up on another planet or under a big rock, and that's okay. I'm not judging you for being an alien or a centipede. But just for you, I'm going to do a little something that I call the recap of the Robin Hood legend. And it goes a little something like this. Do-do-do-do! Once upon a time, there lived a young medieval lord, usually called Robin of Locksley. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Now Robin was pushed to breaking point by the violence and taxation of the evil Prince John and his man, the Sheriff of Nottingham. Robin, you will pay your taxes or I will have your land. Never, Sheriff, you will never take me. And Robin rebels, and he's forced to flee into the forest. When in the forest, he comes across a band of outlaws. "Oh there, stranger, where do you think you were going in those ridiculously green tights?" Because if you didn't know, historically, Little John sounded almost exactly like a pirate. "What's your name there, stranger?" "Well, my name is Robin Hood, actually." "Oh, well, my name's Little John." Rather an ironic name there, John, don't you think? "Comedian, are we?" "Well, perhaps you'd like to join our band of outlaws. They're all boring as fuck." "Well, John, that's a very nice offer, but I was rather thinking I might lead you." "That's very presumptuous. You're arrogant, aren't you?" "Well, what the hell, let's go rob some rich cunts." And so they did. They robbed from the rich and they gave to the poor. And Robin, of course, always found time to get it on with the Maid Marian. Bam, 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 bam. "I've been really trying, Marian, to get you to show me some ankle, but you're just too tight." Yeah, and that is pretty much the story of Robin Hood. Pretty much, thanks. Thanks. Woo. Don't need drama school. That was awesome. So where does this Robin Hood legend come from? Did he actually exist? Well, just for you guys, I did some research, and it turns out that he might have. Yes. From all the evidence I read, it's fairly inconclusive. But, it'll take about 157 pages of any book to actually tell you that. Not that I read all 157 pages. I kind of gave up about halfway and started reading this, which was really hot. But the point remains. The legend emerged in sort of about the 1200s when villagers and peasants would sit around the fire and tell stories of an outlaw, right? Now these stories were eventually written down at the end of the 1400s, and it's from those stories, those written stories, that the legend that we know emerges. All of the characters appeared in those stories. Now some historians think he's based on real historical outlaws, like a guy called Fulk Fitzwarren and another guy called Eustace the Monk, who wasn't even a monk, he was a pirate, which is way cool, and these are both historical figures that we actually know about, whose histories we can trace, but who've never had a movie made about them ever. Why? Because they're always making films about fucking Robin Hood. But, like Robin Hood, they were outlaws, right, who rebelled against the tyranny of King John. Now John is one of the greatest characters in history. Again, had almost no films made about him, but he is the one in the Robin Hood legend who they're all raising the taxes for. You may recognise him as this guy. You'll be surprised to hear he wasn't actually a lion. He was a man. But he did way worse things than collect taxes, right? He was greedy, calculating, callous, cold. In fact, he was such a bad guy. He was the guy that the whole Robin Hood legend emerged because of, right? He was more like this. Scary ass, right? But to teach you how evil he really was, Chris and I have developed something special that we call the barometer of evil. Hit it, maestro. Alright. When John's father, Henry II, was on his deathbed, dying, the best thing to do on a deathbed, he received a parchment that had the names of all the people who just rebelled against him. Top of the list was his favourite and most trusted son, John. Word is he died of a broken heart. Then, when Richard, his brother, was on the throne and returning from the Crusades where he'd been all heroic and shit, he was captured and held to ransom. Did John A. help rescue his brother, B. help pay the ransom, or C. betray his brother and try to steal his crown? You've got it right, he betrayed his brother. Then, when Richard died, there was a contest over who should rule, John or his 16-year-old nephew Arthur. What did John do? That's right, he took the crown. And Arthur mysteriously disappeared, never to be seen again. My money's on secretly put to death. What about you? Now, John was a famous womanizer, but he took to wife a young Isabella of Angoulême. Young being the operative word. She was 12. Yeah, and betrothed to someone else. Did that stop John? Hell no, he took her anyway. Why? Because she was a hottie. And then, to top it all off, he threw an elderly woman called Maud de Browse into a dungeon called an oubliette and starved her to death. He was a really, 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 really evil dude. That's right. Thank Frank Sinatra, not me. He wrote that song. I just made it educational. John was such an arsehole that he forced his barons into a corner, and they actually all rebelled against him and forced him to sign Magna Carta in 1215. Now, this is the first document that ever limited the powers of a sovereign, and it's seen today as the beginnings of our modern constitution. So it's kind of easy to see in a tyrannical regime like this that the legend of a heroic outlaw would emerge and take root.